Diet and nutrition are typically the first two aspects that come to our mind when we talk about health. However, good health is not just about physical well-being. Wellness is an integration of physical, mental, and spiritual health. It is important to maintain a healthy balance between mind, body, and soul by nurturing one's whole self that leads to a quality life. Hello everyone, this is Anshu Jain from Qatar Day and you are watching the Health Special episode of Qatar Day Presents, the Candid Talk Spheres of Health, brought to you by Bio Oil, the world's leading oil for stretch and scar marks. And joining us today to talk about overall well-being is a family medicine practitioner who is a specialist in occupational health. He is a fitness enthusiast with a special interest in lifestyle medicine. And beyond that, he is renowned in Qatar as an artist at par. Friends, please help me welcome the multi-talented Dr. Sri Kumar Padmanabhan. Thank you so much, Dr. Sri, for agreeing to be a part of our show. It is such a great pleasure to see you here with us today.
Thank you, Anshu, for having me here on this Spheres of Health segment, and especially for a topic which is very dear to my mind. Thank you. Shoot.
Well, so health, it is such a diverse subject.
Yeah.
But I would want to start with one topic that comes to anybody's mind first when we talk about good health or well-being.
Okay.
That is nutrition.
Okay. Yeah.
So, Dr. Shri, I would want to know that how should I perceive that I'm getting all the nutrition that I require?
See, Anshu, if you are talking about nutrition, it is the food we eat which will give us energy, which give us good health, and have a good mindset. Okay. So, we derive all this from a wide range of nutrients which we generally tell as carbohydrate, proteins, fat, minerals, vitamins, water, fiber. So all these things are part of nutrients. And again, if I have to elaborate a little more, you tell about macronutrients and micronutrients. You must be hearing a lot. See, again, macro are those stuff which has to be consumed in a bigger amount, like carbs, proteins, and fat, water, of course. And micro are those minor things, some of the vitamins or minerals. When you are telling about whether we are getting the correct nutrition, isn't it? See, first of all, nutrition deficiency manifests at a very later stage. So initially you won't be able to know whether you are deficient or not. But regarding the macro, if you are not eating, if you are not having your carbs, that day you will feel tired, isn't it? And if you are not having enough protein, you will feel that you are getting wasted. So macros, maybe you will be able to find it earlier, but micro, it is very difficult, but still there are some symptoms, some manifestations. If you are vitamin deficient, you may feel tired all the time, you may lose your appetite, your hairs will become brittle, there might be skin changes, there might be something called ankylosing stomatitis or chelosis where you will have oral changes, you will feel tired, depressed, all this stuff but see, we can't pinpoint unless you are looking into it, otherwise it is difficult. But as such, everything has a manifestation, but at a later stage. So it is not able to, you won't be able to pinpoint it very early.
All right, so basically the side effects or the impact of whatever we are eating or not eating,
yes,
it is visible or it is
visible at a later stage.
At a later stage.
Yes, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I would want to know one thing here. Does calories, frequencies and mealtime matter?
See, different questions. Now, calories, do you mean about counting calories?
Yes.
See, there is a yes and no to that. See, if on a general, like daily, day-to-day life, I don't advise you to count calories. I'll explain it later. What I usually advise is to eat all different sorts of good foods, which we are going to mention later, and eat in moderation. Okay, you really don't need to count your calories. But of course, if I'm giving advice to a person who is obese or overweight and he wants to reduce weight, I may tell them to count the calories because there is some sort of accountability. So if you don't know really what you are eating, you can't reduce it, isn't it? But again, coming about the timing of the meal time.
Yeah.
See, again, let me tell you once more, all things related to nutrition and physical activity, still research are going on. So maybe what I tell today may be outdated later. So still research are going on. But again, meal time, we have this concept like, eat breakfast like a king and lunch like a prince and your dinner or supper like a pauper. That has been in our minds since I think more than 100 years. This was actually developed by a dietitian. Anyway, But calorie is what you eat the whole day. So if you are taking your calorie, see, if you are eating high calorie food in the early part of the day, then if a person has to have this much calorie, that is finished by afternoon. So you can't have more food at the end of the day.
Yes.
So they are telling it is two different thoughts are there. One actually it's again the calories which is divided all over the day. But some studies have shown people who tend to eat more at night have shown increased weight gain compared to others. You know, even the total calorie intake on one day is same. Studies are done on mice. Okay, so think again, why when people eat at night they put on weight? Because they don't. How do you how do you think that people eat at night? They watch TV, they do something on a computer, they'll have food on one side. And once you do, once you are focused on one activity and you are eating, you won't know how much is going into your, your tummy. So again, if that also is accounted, okay. So generally, what I advise my clients, my patients, try to eat around 80 to 90% of your food by 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. If you are going to sleep at 10. So at least you have a 2 hours gap for whatever you are eating to digest.
Yes, to digest properly.
But there is no problem in taking a snack. That 10% should be accounted to your whole diet. Okay, count. If you are taking nuts, you have maybe 6 walnut half or 8 walnut half. If you have peanut, 1 handful of peanut. If you have popcorn, people tell popcorn is okay. No, 1 glass of popcorn, not a big dabba of popcorn. So everything should be accounted. So that's why calories, you should know what you are eating, but that doesn't mean every day on a day-to-day basis you have to count your calories. You should know what you are eating. Okay, so more than calories, knowing the food is important.
Exactly.
Okay.
So when we say that knowing the food is important,
Yeah.
then comes the question that what according to you should be the ideal meal plan?
Okay. See, an ideal meal plan, what now I will advise is a thing which will have all the essential nutrients for you. So it mainly comes from wholly plant-based food. I'm not telling vegetarian or vegan. You can have non-vegetarian products, but reduce the amount of non-vegetarian food and mostly plant-based food, and don't go for solid fat, which is the butter, and I'm not telling don't reduce the amount of solid fat like butter, margarine, and red meat to be reduced. Fried food should be reduced. Drink more water. Have enough fibers. So if fruits and vegetables, as I told, whole plant-based food, more brown grains. So if you have all of them in a balance, that's it. Go for it.
Dr. Shri, you just mentioned about grains.
Yeah.
So grain discussions are really trendy as of now.
Okay.
We have got to know recently that grains are dietary health enemy number 1. In the past, it was clearly mentioned that they're one of the healthiest food on this planet. What is the viewpoint? Should one be avoiding grain now? And how about sugar, salt, and other things?
And sure, that enemy is a very harsh word. So no, I'm not against grains. See, the concept is that grains, of course, is needed for our health, because the grains are the one which supplies us most of the carbohydrates. So of course you don't have to avoid grains. And if you are asked to take grains, go for the whole grain, not the refined or white grain, white rice, white fiber, white wheat, whatever it is. But if you are asking me, because people always equate grains to the carbohydrate. If you ask me where do you get your carbohydrates, I get from my rice or from wheat. No, you really don't really have to go for grains to get your carbs. You can get carbs from a wide array of food like vegetables, okay, say potato or carrot or beetroot or fruits. So all of them are going to give you carbohydrates. So it is not compulsory that you have to depend on grains, but grains are not bad because they give the husk. The whole grains have the husk which has a lot of nutrients. So no, it is not that don't eat grains, but everything in moderation. Again, my humble advice is in moderation.
In moderation.
That is it. But if you have any specific allergy to any specific grain, you have a wheat allergy or like gluten allergy, you can avoid grain. Otherwise, you don't need to avoid it.
Okay, so it is all about eating in moderation and keeping in mind your current health status.
Yes,
whether you're allergic to something or not.
Yes.
Depending upon that.
Yep.
It's clear to us, I guess. Dr. Shri, I would want to know, there is a lot of speculation going on about the routine water intake.
Okay.
What is the appropriate quantity of water that one should be taking, consuming on a day-to-day basis?
Okay. Anshu, there are various formula available to calculate how much water one person should take. Okay. So leave the formula. But here in Qatar, our Ministry of Public Health as well as USA, the Nutrition Academy, they all have come out with a standard telling that a man will need about 3.7 liters of water. That means around 15.5 cup to 40 ml cup of water a day, and women will need around 2.7 liters. But again, see, it is a huge amount.
Exactly.
Again, you should understand the water, what they are telling, about 80% is the liquid which we are drinking. The 20% water is already in the food you are eating. So again, if you are roughly telling to a person, at least let them have 8 to 10 glasses of water a day. That should be enough. Okay, that will keep you hydrated. But some people really overdo the stuff. They start drinking water a lot and lot. So if you are really overdoing, it can lead to some problems where you will have some sodium deficiency and other mineral deficiency. So don't overdo anything. Okay, anything in moderation. So general advice, 8 to 10 glasses of water. That should be good. And again, you don't really wait for being thirsty, especially in this part of the world where it is, if you are going, if a person is working out, he is in the sun. Okay, so that person has to. There are so many other standards which most of the industries now keep. Looking at their urine color, they have to drink more water. They have to keep themselves hydrated. But if you are office going person, you are inside a air conditioned room. 8 to 10 glasses, that is good enough.
Okay, so the main criteria could be the color of your urine.
Yeah, that is one which we advise for people who are working out in the sun, because that's very easy for them to gauge. So that's it.
Exactly, and that is applicable for kids as well?
Of course, all. But again, what happens with kids is, see, they really don't know. They don't gauge their thirst, and sometimes we might have to force them to, to drink, ask them, keep this much bottle or keep one bottle ready for them to drink from morning till evening. Okay, so see that they are drinking that much water.
But the main criteria to judge can be the color of the urine.
Yeah, that's it's an easier criteria.
Yes. It should be crystal clear.
Yes, sort of, yeah, or straw colored.
Okay. Got it. Dr. Shri, one question, one deficiency which is very common these days and we keep hearing about it. I mean, basically two, that is vitamin B12 and vitamin D.
Yeah.
I would want to know, I'm not talking about the supplements here.
Okay.
Because we have been seeing that I've been getting injections a lot of vitamin B12. What are the natural ways of balancing these two deficiencies for both vegetarians and non-vegetarians?
You mean through diet?
Through diet.
Okay. See, vitamin D mainly we'll get through sunlight.
Yes.
So whether it is vegetarians or non-vegetarian. And see, in this part of the world, we can't go out in the sun and expose ourselves for 10 to 15 minutes, okay, because it's really hot. And you get vitamin D during, if I'm correct, it is between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m., which is very hot. Okay, so that's the time which you are going to get sunlight. Vitamin D.
One thing here.
Yes.
I was told, I was being informed that normally vitamin D that we get is during the time when the sun rises.
No, it's not like that.
Oh,
In our part, in this tropics, it is mainly between 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. or even 3 p.m. That's the time when the sun rays are direct, and that's the time we are going to get sunlight, vitamin D from the sunlight.
Okay.
But if you are asking about the food sources, non-vegetarians have much better chance of getting vitamin D from food, because egg yolk, lot of oil, even meat, all of them have vitamin D. But for vegetarian source, both it applies for both vitamin D as well as vitamin B12. Vegetarians have little more difficulty, so of course they will get vitamin D from mushrooms and soy and all those legumes actually, but still they might have to go for fortified food or supplements, because it is not, vitamin D is not very easily got from food. Regarding B12, deficiency is mostly seen in vegetarians or vegans, because non-vegetarians usually don't have B12 deficiency because their food have enough B12. But if you are for vegetarians or vegans, the plant-based food does not have that much B12, so they may have to depend on fortified food, like fortified soy milk or fortified cereals, which has added B12 in that. Or pure vegetarian source is again like green, like some algae and spirulina and soy products. But again, that is not something which we usually take. And even if you take, once you start cooking, the amount of B12 which is delivered to your body reduces.
Reduces.
Vegetarians and vegans may need supplements, so they may have to check their B12 levels in between and has to go for supplements.
So when we talk about supplements, Dr. Shri,
Yep.
I mean, there are supplements available for everything and anything these days. You talk about protein, you talk about iron, you talk about vitamins, whatnot. How safe it is where the world is mostly dependent on supplements these days? How safe it is to take or consume these supplements?
Okay, that's a very valid question because you see vitamins for everything nowadays.
Yes.
See, supplements are usually given either to improve your health or sometimes to make up for some deficiency in your. So, if you have a specific deficiency, like say iron deficiency, and or B12 deficiency, as I told, or D deficiency, where you think your diet or normal routine practices can't make up for that, go for the supplement. That's okay. But you see, you go to the market, you'll see supplements for everything.
Everything.
So most of the supplements are still under research. You will see omega-3, you will see fish liver oil, you will see glucosamine chondroitin sulfide. So all this stuff, there have been some pros and cons for this. Some of them has been found beneficial, but then a new study comes and tell no, it is not deficient. It's not really beneficial. So what I'm telling, each has to be. If you are going to go for a supplement, just read a little more about that and see the latest studies. Then go for the supplement. But if you have specific deficiency, you take the supplement. But supplements is not going to replace your normal diet. So as I told before, you are having a proper balanced diet, you really won't need supplements. Okay, unless that specific thing.
So if you're having a balanced diet, I mean, supplements can never replace
No,
the natural
of course, no,
food
of course,
items.
no.
Because if you see at the current situation, in the current times, the pandemic that we are going through, I was watching a television ad wherein it was clearly mentioned, immunity booster supplement. I was like, really? Immunity booster? You are getting immunity booster milk. You are getting immunity booster. Every single food item is now immunity booster.
See.
It added a lot of supplements. So
they also have to survive. They have to, give a catch line. That is it.
Yes.
But you eat proper food. That's I think
most important.
that they can't tell. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I would want to know one question, Dr. Shri. We know that non-vegetarian diet has got a lot of supplements, which is available to them naturally. But how about vegetarians? When I say that, how do a vegetarian get all the essential fatty acids required for the body? And at the same time, about the proteins I would want to know for vegetarians in particular.
Okay, a very valid question, Anshu, because there is a common thinking that people who go for exercise or muscle muscle training, they won't get enough proteins from vegetarian source. Okay, it is not like that.
Yeah.
You get all sort of proteins from vegetables, like you go for broccoli, you go for all these green leafy vegetables, or you go for nuts, or you go for legumes. Okay, because which is huge. Any sort of legumes or lentils, everything has protein. So you are not going to become protein deficient if you are on a vegetarian diet. I'm a vegetarian, and I don't think I ever felt a need of. I never had a protein deficiency. I don't think so, and so there is no nothing that you have to be on a non-vegetarian diet to get proteins. As I again mentioned, if people are confused, very easy is broccoli, legumes, lentils. That is it. Or soy product, all the soy products. And again, fatty acids, all the nuts, walnut, almond, all the different nuts, and again soy products. So you'll get all the fatty acids also. So there is no limitation for vegetarians. You can have all your nutrition except, as I told, B12 from vegetable source. No
so
issues.
you can easily build muscle.
Of course, yeah, there are a lot of vegetarians who build muscles, of
you
course.
You are the life example of that, right?
No, I'm not. Yeah, of course.
It's great, Dr. Shri.
Yeah.
Dr. Shri, I would want to know that, there's a lot of concept which revolves around exercising on a day-to-day basis. So how much exercise is needed for a body on a regular basis?
See, according to scientific research, they are telling everyone, will need at least 150 minutes of moderate exercise in a week.
150.
150 minutes. So that is around 30 minutes a day. moderate exercise.
Okay.
Or if you're going for a vigorous exercise, you need 15 minutes a day. That means 75 minutes in a week. This can be mixed and matched. Okay.
Okay.
Now you'll next ask what is a moderate and what is a vigorous. Okay, that question is
Exactly
about
that.
to come.
Yes.
Okay, so if you are doing any sort of exercise where you can talk but you can't sing. Okay, say you are on a treadmill or you are walking, a phone is coming. Okay, you can answer the phone. Okay, but you can't sing a song to that person. That means you are having a moderate exercise.
Okay.
At the same time, if you can't even talk, like few lines, you have to stop, take a
You're
breath,
panting.
and then if you're panting, that means a vigorous exercise. So
Okay.
so you can have a mix and match of the exercise. That is the minimum exercise a person has to do. Yes.
All right. Okay, so it should be between 15 to 20 minutes on a day-to-day basis. That's good enough.
I'll just put again for 30. I advise my patients to go for a 40-minute exercise. But see, that 30 or 40 minutes, you should be active. There are people who come and tell me, doctor, I go for swimming, and I'm not making fun of anybody, but still what happens is they go to the swimming pool, they swim one lap and are in the pool for the next 10 minutes, then take the next one lap. No, you need 30
Yes.
minutes continuous activity.
Right. Very right.
Yes.
It's clear.
Yeah.
I would want to know what is the difference between endurance, physical activity,
Okay.
and fitness.
Okay. See, physical activity is anything what we are doing to move your muscle, which will need calories, which will need energy. So, like I'm talking to you, this is a physical activity. You are walking, I'm climbing up the stairs. That are normal physical activity. But when we tell about exercise, what we mean is it is mostly a planned or structured thing where we repeatedly do a thing. Okay, for a specific amount of time. So your muscle will be working continuously for that period, and your heartbeat will go up and your heart strength will go up. So that are the after effects of the exercise part, what you are telling. Now there is another question about, like people ask about, so exercise, what about my muscle strength, what about my endurance? That's another question which usually comes. See, when you are lifting a heavy weight, okay, you can't keep on lifting the heavy for a longer period of time. So you are doing an exercise, okay, if you are doing your weight training, anything, by the time you are getting tired by 8 times you are doing, that means that weight is going to build your strength.
Okay.
But at the same time, you are continuously doing an activity for a longer period of time, that will build your endurance. So now, whether you need strength, whether you need endurance, see, in daily life, you may have to lift something. At the same time, you have to run for something. So lifting something will need your muscle strength, and running to get something will need your endurance. So I usually advise people to exercise in such a way that they get both the strength as well as endurance. See, if back in our place, we may have to run after a bus to catch a bus. So that means you need endurance. Okay. At the same time, you may have to lift something at home, you need strength. It's plain as that. So exercise always balance between endurance and strength.
Endurance.
Yes, that is
Right.
it. Yeah.
I guess endurance comes towards a later stage. You
Yes,
build
of
your
course.
strength once, and then
It goes side by side. So, like, see, if a person is going to a gymnasium, they start going on a treadmill or running, or you run to the gymnasium, that gives you endurance. And once you reach the gymnasium, you are going to lift something, that gives you strength.
strength. So they go
Yeah,
hand in hand.
It is not like
altogether.
separate. No.
Yes.
Yeah. You should always train together. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Dr. Sri, when we talk about fitness, you know, like people, this concept of fitness has been portrayed in altogether a very different manner. I would want to know, does getting a six-pack abs really validate fitness?
See, Anshu, six-pack, of course, even though it is very tempting and very aesthetic to look at, this is just a vanity metric. Okay, I'm not saying six-pack is people who are six-pack is unhealthy, but it does not have any equation with being healthy. Okay, if you want to know more about six-pack, what happens, we should know about our body fat percentage. So normally, every person has a body fat percentage. For men, it is average is between 20 to 24, but if you are telling about a fitness standard, it goes down to 14 to 18 or something like that. So what happens, if you really want your six-pack to show, your body fat percentage has to go below 10, sometimes even 8. Then only your body will not have any fat, and you'll see the muscles. If you are going to such a low body fat percentage for a longer period of time, it affects your neurological function, your hormones, lot of hormones. Even women who go for like that trimmed look will have a lot of hormonal problems. So it is definitely not advisable on a long run. For a fitness shoot or a model shoot, okay, you can have this for a specific period of time, but even then, people who go for such events, they may be depriving themselves of salt and water, which is not really good. So see, if you really like six-pack, go for it, but I don't advise. That is not a equation or for good health. Okay,
Alright.
it is just an aesthetic thing. Okay, you six-pack doesn't mean your health is good.
Okay, it is not a conversion that necessarily,
No.
because when we look at anyone having such a good physique, the
Yes.
first impression that we get is how fit that person looks.
Yes,
So
yes.
that necessarily does not validate fitness.
No, not at all, not at all.
I would want to know
Yes.
what exactly fitness is. If that is not the case, what defines fitness?
See, fitness is something which will help you to perform your daily activity without any extra effort, and which will make you mentally good, make you feel mentally good. See, I'll give you an example. A person who is doing an office job, okay, so he can come, take the car, park your car, come up the stairs or come up the lift, do the daily activities. He's fit for that job. But if the same person you are asking to go for a firefighting job, okay, it may be very strenuous for him. So that means he's not fit for that particular job, isn't it? So the fitness also, even though a same person may be fit for one job, that person may not be fit for another job. So it is, the fitness is the overall quotient of what you are getting for your daily activities. So you can't tell, that, but I can't tell that you are unfit. You are fit for this job. Okay, but for the other job, you need higher fitness. So you have to train more, or your food habits should be in such a way, or your calorie intake and output should be such a way that you will be fit for that and your physical activity. So it is a comparative term according to your physique, your job, and your daily activities.
Daily activities.
Okay.
It
Yeah.
varies.
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Dr. Shree, few food items or diet trends are extremely popular these days. You talk about Whole30,
Okay.
keto diet.
Yeah.
You talk about intermittent fasting. I would want to know, is it really necessary to follow these trends to be physically healthy or
See-
mentally overall well-being I'm talking about?
As I told you before, see, all this diet, they must have worked for somebody. That is why people are following that. And all of them have their pros and cons. So most of the diet, how they work, they try to eliminate a particular food group, isn't it? You take for keto, they are telling don't take carbs. You tell, what is that, Whole30.
Whole30.
Again, they also restrict a lot of grains and even legumes they avoid.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if you go for vegan diet, they tell no,
No
animal
dairy
products, no
products.
dairy products, nothing. So see, all of them work for a smaller period, but when you of course you will definitely lose weight also, that is for sure. But what happens, you are going to cut down on a lot of essential nutrients and ingredients in your daily diet, which in long run is going to harm your body. I don't want to pinpoint any particular diet. Again, if you are asking me, know your food, see what you are eating, try to get all your different nutrients from all different sources, and that is it. Maybe for a shorter period, one of these diets might work, but I don't advise anyone to follow, because good diet is something which you can follow all through your life in a very satisfactory manner. Okay, so again, whole plant-based food, minimal of animal products, lot of water, good sleep, all of this is a part of nutrition. There is something called Mediterranean diet also, which people in the Mediterranean subcontinent, that part of the world, they take. They have this sort of pattern where they have all the different ingredients, and of course they have wine also, no harm. So that is one of the diet which, if you are asking to as an example, I can point, but otherwise that's it.
So have a healthy lifestyle, eat everything in moderation, exercise, and you will be fit.
Yes, sort of.
Great, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Dr. Shree would want to know one thing, that's one of the very important factors that we keep listening. What is the role of BMI, BMR, calories, and sleep in particular
Okay.
in defining fitness?
These are all terms again, numbers. See, BMI, if somebody is asking what my ideal weight should be, we usually calculate this thing called BMI. It's the body mass index. So it is a number which you get by dividing your weight in kilogram divided by your height in meter square. Okay. So you get a number normally. It is defined between 18.5 to 24.9. If the number is between that, that's a normal BMI. Above 24.9, that is 25 to 29.9 is overweight, and above 30 is obese. And then it goes obese 1, 2, morbid obesity, all the stuff comes. But again, let me tell you, there is a lot of limitations for BMI. So just because somebody's BMI is above 25, they needn't be overweight or obese. I'll tell you, yeah, because what happens, first of all, BMI doesn't take into account your muscle mass. Okay, so a same amount of fat and same amount of muscle will weight around 18% more, but still the person might be healthy. So it does not take into account your fat percentage and your muscle mass. Again, BMI was initially designed or coined or studied for Caucasians or like white Europeans. So of course there is a big racial difference between all over the world. So you can't one standard fits all. No, it's not like that. So now what has happened is different parts of the world, different countries have made their own studies, and Japanese and Chinese, they have made the BMI stand a little more slightly low for their physique. For them, the upper limit of BMI, normal BMI is 24. So 24 to 28 is overweight, and above 28 is obese, compared to the Europeans 30. And India, there have been studies and they are recommending the upper limit for Indians should be 23. So after 23 you are overweight.
Obese.
Okay, overweight, and about 27 you are obese. In that case, most of us, not you, most of us will be overweight or obese. So that is a new standard they are telling. So that's about BMI. Now again, I am telling this is just a number. Okay, BMR is the basal metabolic rate. So like if you are not doing anything, you are just meditating or you are sleeping, that's the energy your body will need. That's the basic energy you will need. So you have to eat that much to remain healthy. Okay, that is basal metabolic rate. Why you should know the basal metabolic rate is there is something called TDEE, which is the total caloric requirement, actually daily energy expenditure. So that is according to your type of activity you are doing. If you are doing an office job, if you are doing a heavy job, so once you know how, there's a quotient to multiply your BMR. So that is extra energy you need. So a person who wants to reduce weight should be eating, say, 500 calories less than the total energy required. That means your body will start that much from your what you have. So that is again, these are all numbers. I don't go by numbers. Try to see a person as a whole. Okay, of course, for gauging or see how their progress is, this might help, but these are not the to be so much focused. Focused. Yes,
that should not be the exact criteria that based on the numbers that we should be doing everything and anything.
Yes.
How about sleep?
Of course, I forgot to mention that sleep is very important, because sleep is a time when your body does all the repair work. Okay, so every day if you are doing any sort of activity or if you are doing exercise, your muscle grows by repairing. So sleep is very important for that repair part. For if people are doing muscle build, like bodybuilding, muscle to grow, people for replenishing, daily your body uses up a lot of hormones and enzymes that has to be replenished. So sleep is the time when all this stuff happens. That's why they are telling 7 to 8 hours sleep is very important.
It's extremely important.
Yes, it's very important.
Yes, so sleep is one of the most important criteria. We all tend to get so busy in our lives these days that one factor that we are compromising heavily with is sleep cycle.
Sadly, yes.
Which should ideally be not the case at all.
Of course.
To all our viewers, we would like to request that whatever you're doing, ensure that you are getting at least 7 to 8 hours of good sleep, including us.
Yeah, including us. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Right. Dr. Shreen, moving to another subject which is very dear to me. Okay. Now, when we talk about health, mostly what happens is people normally associate good health with good physique, nutrition, diet and exercise.
Yes.
But one factor that plays a dominant role in defining our health, I believe, is the cognition. The cognitive health, I mean here.
Okay.
Society sees this as altogether a very different subject. That is physical health and cognitive health. That is mental health.
Okay.
I would want to know how important it is to be mentally fit. And when I'm talking about cognitive health, What am I aiming at?
See, if you are, like as we told, having good food, good exercise, but still you are not happy, your quality of life is gone, isn't it? So mental health is, again, nowadays you can't separate mental health and physical health. They are two sides of the same coin. Okay, you can't tell, now I have my physical health, let me go for mental health. No, it doesn't work that way. So if you are asking me to define mental health, it is something like, you learn day by day, try to adjust or cope up with the different positive or negative things which is going to happen in your life, and try to get involved in the society, get connected with people. So if all of this are happening, then you will be peaceful with yourself and you will have a good mental health. So what you should aim is that, day to day life, you should be open to learn new things, okay? And you will face a lot of challenges. You will have to go through a wide range of emotions. You will be happy, you will be sad, you will be angry, you might be jealous. These are all emotions, but you should learn out of these emotions and cope up with them, and bring it out in such a way that at the end you will be able to contribute something good to the society, and you should feel good. Okay, so putting it short, that's the way mental health should be. Yes.
So it is most importantly what, as you have rightly portrayed here, it is feeling good about oneself.
Yes, good.
Dr. Sri, but when we say that, the symptoms of physical health, it is clearly evident.
Of
If
course.
you're facing any physical health issue, that time it is evident you experience pain or any other symptom. How about mental health? How should one get to know if they are having any mental health or cognitive health issues?
Manshu, you will be surprised to know, see, there are more than 33 different symptoms which has been already defined.
33.
Almost more than that,
Yeah.
which they tell is a reason of your bad mental health.
Okay.
And let me tell you what are the things. I think our viewers will be surprised. Starting with headache, palpitation, loss of sleep, skin rashes, pain, like neck pain, back pain, joint pain, all different sorts of pain, stomach discomfort, bloating, abdominal pain, neurotic pain. So there are a lot of people come and see the doctors for all these complaints. They are telling around 10% of the outpatient department patients are coming because of these symptoms, are not because of real physical problem. It's all because of their stress or poor mental health.
They confuse it with physical
Yes,
health.
they and the doctors. Okay, so it is a elimination thing. So mental health, that's why the importance of mental health. It can lead to it can give rise to a lot of physical symptoms.
Issues.
So if you are not happy, you will develop all these symptoms, and if you are not physically fit, of course you will be mentally depressed and you will get a lot of mental things. So that's why I'm telling this all
Interlinked.
Yeah, and it's the same thing, same stuff only. So we have to give more importance to your mental health. That's very important. Yes.
But it's such a sad thing, Dr. Sri, that still, people talk so openly about their physical health issues, but when we talk about mental health or cognitive health, people try, to hide it, not share their problems publicly, or not even publicly to the doctor as well.
Yes.
What is your viewpoint? How should they be addressing it? And when I'm talking about addressing, I would want to know what are the designated helpers? Who are the designated helpers? And what is the difference between them?
See, Anshu, the thing is, of course, mental health topics or even stress is a big taboo in our society. That is gradually changing, but I feel that as you told about the designated helpers, we have less designated helpers in this part of the world. Means psychologist, psychiatrist, psychiatric nurse, psychoanalyst, social helpers, and support groups, and even art therapist. Okay, so all these are designated helpers. But commonly, when we think about mental health, it comes to us as psychiatrist and psychologist. Of course, the upper ones. So psychiatrists try to find out what happened in their body, what chemical imbalance is there, and try to treat with tablets or medications. At the same time, psychologists try to analyze their behavior pattern or what they are thinking, their thought process, and try to deal more by talking and finding and trying to behavioral modification. Okay, so if you are going for an art therapy, again, art therapists, what they do, they try to ask people to bring out their emotions by either writing or talking or painting or whatever it is.
Dance, there's so
Yeah,
many, yes.
so these are different ways. So all of these people can help, and support groups, if they have, will help. But of course, it is a very taboo subject in our society, and I hope that it will change. Or because if you go to Western countries, I think almost everyone has their appointed psychiatrist or psychologist. They can go and talk. Okay, but here we don't even talk to our spouse or our our own people. We are little skeptical to talk what they will think about us.
Exactly.
Okay, so I think
Yeah.
that should change. That will change.
Yes.
But it is very important.
Yes. So the way physical health issues are addressed openly, without any hesitation. Now the time has reached wherein we are in 21st century. The mental health issue should be discussed exactly in the same manner.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Because the way physical health issues can be sorted, mental health issues can be certainly sorted too.
Of course. Of
and
course.
they are both interlinked.
Of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Dr. Shree, one pattern that we are seeing, that means yes, many are following too, that to keep yourself physically and mentally healthy and happy is to follow the track of a spiritual health.
Okay.
I would want to know, what basically is the spiritual health and how is it related to physical and cognitive health?
I don't know whether I am the correct person to answer this. Anyway, you are telling
You
about.
look properly like a Sufi guru now.
Okay, regarding spiritual health, see, there is always a confusion or comparing spirituality and religion. Of course, so that is it. See, they are a subset of each other, but spirituality does not mean you should be religious. Even a religious atheist person also can be spiritual. It is again a belief on something. Okay, so if which has a positive outcome to the society. I'm not saying you can believe anything and then you can do, no. So previously psychiatrists used to equate religion to mental health, mental illness, and they were telling whoever has a strong belief on religion or religious doctrines are sort of cracked. But now, no, they have changed their opinion. They have found out that spirituality really helps people, or belief on a certain set of pattern. They help people to get connected, and at the end it makes them feel good. Okay, there have been studies done on people with chronic diseases, fatal illnesses, who have lost hope. Okay, and then they found a spiritual calling or a religious calling or a religious group. So there they have found out a meaning of their life. Okay, so what are the outcome? Maybe it will not cure the illness. Okay, but they will have a feeling of well-being. Okay, so that is more important. So if following a spiritual pathway or religious pathway can make you feel good, improve your quality of life, why not? We should be having that.
Right. So, as you're mentioning that spirituality is more about finding the purpose of life, the
Yes.
meaning of life.
Meaning of
that
life.
belief and faith on some particular aspect, and
Yes.
you're not necessarily focusing towards a religion or anything else. It can be anything.
Anything,
But
yeah,
it is
yeah.
mostly about finding that purpose in
Purpose
life.
of life, yeah.
So when we say that, would it be valid to say that yes, there is something called as a spiritual illness for people who do not find any purpose in their life?
See, what I'm, you're telling about spiritual illness, I can't tell it is an illness part, it is almost a deficiency, okay, because people lose hope, okay, they don't have a focus. So, what we can do to, support them, so you take your own time to know what is happening, okay, look into oneself, and engaging in activities will make you happy, okay, if it is like meditating or any sort of activity like drawing or painting or dancing or even traveling, take a spiritual journey, anything which will make you feel good. Try to do that, but mainly look into oneself, okay, or take time to think about what makes you happy and go ahead with that. That will give you a sense of well-being, okay. So I don't like the term spiritual illness. It is mostly a spiritual deficiency.
Deficiency.
Okay, it's not an illness as such.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. So it is all about getting involved in the activities that makes one feel good about
Yes,
themselves.
that is true. That is
Okay.
true. Yeah.
Dr. Shree, one last question I would want to know. After that, I would certainly want you to give a message to all our audiences out here.
Yes.
How important it is to be connected in life. When I say that, I mean, what is the importance of social connections in one's life?
Very valid question in these days. See, we all are going through a very disconnected phase of life. With COVID, you are not able to meet your dear ones, either from here or, people are in our country where our parents, our relatives. So I think now people can relate to what disconnection is. Okay, this connectivity is very important to boost your mental health and on long term on your physical health, or not long term, immediately on your physical health. Even personally, like I have, even for the last few months I was really upset because I can't go and see my parents, my in-laws. Even my son was abroad. That is the reason for this. So that makes people do a lot of negative things or gives negative thoughts, but it is how you convert your negative thoughts to a positive thing. That is how connectedness is important. And see, if you are asking for an example for connectedness, you have heard about so many support groups, say Alcoholics Anonymous. Why they are going there? Because once they open up and start talking, they will feel good about themselves. They will feel empowered, isn't it? So they feel, we are not bad people. We all came to that situation because of certain things. So you, from learning from others and from sharing your thoughts, you are able to get over to your, your negative things. So of course, connectedness, or connectivity is very important in your life. Okay, so you have to, and it has lack of connectivity is as bad as hypertension or diabetes or obesity. Okay, so we all know humans are social beings. So without that, you are lost.
Very true.
Yes.
In the era, in times wherein everybody is becoming so focused and so self-centered that we are losing the meaning of social life and connectivity. It is a very apt thing that you have mentioned. It is extremely important to survive and thrive in life, to be socially connected.
Yes, yeah.
It is definitely associated with the entire well-being. I cannot just name it a physical health, mental health, spiritual health, but overall well-being.
It's a whole thing.
Feeling that, having that feeling of being connected with someone, that is extremely important.
Yes.
Dr. Shree, it was such a pleasure having the conversation with you. We had such diverse range of subjects, and you gave every insight was really put forward in a beautiful manner. One message that you would want to give to all our listeners and viewers.
Okay, see, we have been talking a lot about different numbers like BMI, BMR, but these numbers are not indicator for your individual health. It is more about how you treat your body and your mind, which will give you a good output of your overall wellness. So making it short, on putting it gently, eat a rainbow, eat a wide variety of plant-based food of different colors, move your body and smile. The world will smile at you. Thank you, Anshu.
So guys, I was in conversation with Dr. Shree Kumar Padmanabhan, the family medicine specialist and a lifestyle enthusiast. And I would like to share with you the key points from this wonderful conversation. Number 1, know your food and eat in moderation. Number 2, move your body, and that means exercise regularly for at least 20 to 30 minutes. Number 3, it's extremely important to feel good about yourself. Number 4, it is again important to have some purpose in life. And most importantly, number 5, that plays a dominant role in determining your overall fitness is having that feeling of being connected with people around you. We are getting so very busy in our lives these days that we are actually forgetting the meaning of social connections. But believe me, connectivity plays a dominant role in your overall well-being. Well, this is Anshu Jain, your host for the Candid Talk, signing off for now with the promise that I'll be back again with another interesting segment the next month. For more such videos, keep following Qatar on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, that is Qatar. And for daily news and updates, keep following our website, that is qatar.com. Stay fit, stay healthy. Thank you.